Keir Hardie and Michael Ford are coming. Ellen Wilkinson, the red flag, she is humming. We get around not as much as Dominic Cummings, even though he's driving blind. We are the Labour grassroots, where like-minded folk dwell. From countryside to city, it's warm and it's witty, the antidote to Pretty Patel. We are the Labour grassroots, time to raise a racket. The future is as bright as Crispin's red jacket. This is the space where we all go hell for leather, free from all the biased BBC blether. Like track and trace, we're better together, just ask Carrie and Meg. Yeah, we got all the people from Inverness, Skegness, Barrow and Furness, Chester, Leicester, Cirencester, Shrewsbury, Oswestry, Swansea, Hernackley, Barnsley, Beccles, Nottingham and Eccles. We are the Labour grassroots, time to plant some grass, where we've always had social distancing between us and the upper class.
Welcome to the Not the Andrew Marr Show, our sixth Not the Andrew Marr Show. So we're very established now. And it's good to see people eating breakfast while we're on. Good to see Rob. And we've got a really busy hour ahead of us. To start off, we have the newspaper review. Then we will be talking to Rebecca Long-Bailey. We've got Clash of the CLPs. And we've got the comedians, and we have Rob at the end, who's got time to eat his breakfast. Now, to join us for the newspaper review, we've got Mark McDonald, who's been on the show a few times. Are you there, Mark?
I am here, yes. Hello.
Good to see you. So you've decided to keep your name in the hat for the NEC.
Yeah, you know, it was
not too long on this.
Okay, it was a tense day. It was a tense day, and it went right up to the wire. We were hoping that the slate would agree with some of our proposals. They didn't, and at the end, sadly, it went past the 5 o'clock. But I'm up for it now. I'm up for the campaign, and trying to get my views across on what we need to do.
All right. Great. And we've also got another candidate standing for the NEC, but this is for the Treasurer, Esther Giles, who's been on the show before from Bristol. Esther, are you there?
I'm here. Hello.
Good to see you. You've been up long?
Yeah, I had to take my daughter to work this morning, so a bit of a rush morning.
Oh, right. Okay. Well, we've got quite a few stories to go through. Obviously, the first story that everyone's concerned about is about Donald Trump. What's your view on it, Mark? Do you think he'll die?
I hope he won't die. I hope you know, who wants to wish somebody ill health, and I certainly don't hope that any person will die of the disease. Obviously, we're getting strange signals out of Washington as to what's going on. We've got yesterday a conflicting message from the White House. My biggest concern, however, is that in 2 weeks' time, 2 weeks before the election, he comes back. He's survived the virus. And he says, look, I took it on and I won. And that's what we need to do. We need to stand up to this thing. And that's because I'm a great leader. And he turns that very small percentage of people that he needs to get to win the election. Remember that there are still many people in America that support him. You know, we get mixed signals in relation to polls over here, but this election is tight and he could still win. And my concern is that he comes out and he plays to it. He plays to the fact that he's won it and he beat the virus. That's because he's the greatest leader in the world.
Esther, what's your view on this? Do you think that, well, it sounds like today he came out and he did a statement today. I heard on the radio, but you know, is this a bit a bit manipulative? Is he going to manipulate this thing?
Well, I'm sure he will. I think now he's got the virus, I think if he does survive, he will be trumpeting his superpowers to the whole of the world. So the fact that he's got it, I think, gives him extra, if he gets through it, gives him extra credibility as a really tough guy. On the other hand, I think it's really mean of the newspaper to almost make fun of Trump saying, will I die, because I suspect that many people that get COVID would be worried and say, will I die? So I think that's a little bit mean, that's a little bit gutter press.
Fair enough, yeah. Now, there's a lot of stories in the paper today about COVID-19. This story was taking up an online discussion, I think the People's Assembly, with Michael Rosen included in it, about false narratives, conspiracy theories about it. What's your view on why do you think there's so many conspiracy theories, Esther?
Well, I think it's partly because people are genuinely concerned and worried. And I think when people are worried, then people will play on those fears. I was talking to my daughter about this in the van on the way to work today. And she said that her friends are talking about, well, now it's masks. And the next thing will be that we all have implants in us. Compulsory implants, so that everybody will know. That's not what she thinks, but she's saying that's what people are saying, so that everyone will know where everyone is, and it's a control mechanism for the government. Now, I know that when we had the Salisbury killings, and I was on call and we were following the instructions of government then, I know that there's a lot more going on that people actually know, and the narrative that goes out to the ordinary man and woman is a very controlled narrative. So I know with COVID, there's loads and loads that we don't know. And I don't know how much of that is leaking out into these so-called fake narratives, but everyone will have their reason, won't they, for propounding a fake narrative and a conspiracy theory, whether it's the superpowers trying to control the people, and whether it's the Chinese trying to take over the world. There are so many motives, so it's hardly surprising in the light of the confusion and ambiguity about it all.
Mark, why do you think these conspiracies have become so prevalent?
Well, conspiracy theories have always been there. From the moon landing to 9/11, we all know that there are people who feed off conspiracy theories. And we can't ignore QAnon and its involvement in giving rise to greater conspiracies internationally. But I think there's three things. I think there's a lack of transparency, and as Esther rightly says, things not being said and deliberately hidden from us. I think there's pandemic fatigue that's going on, that people are just getting fed up of it now, and there's confusion. There's confusion from the message from central government. And the combination of three feeds the fire of conspiracy theories. My view is the fault lies right in Westminster at Downing Street, where they have failed and consistently failed to put out a clear message. And they've overpromised, they've over-targeted, and they've not met any of the targets. And people are now just fed up of the whole thing. And as I say, that feeds the fuel of conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I mean that's what we get from some of the other stories that have come out. People are fatigued by it, and if you look at this story here, working from home over winter will add £100 to fuel bills. I mean, that's inevitable. If we have this lockdown through winter, people are going to struggle financially, and especially if you add to that the end of furlough. What do you think the Labour Party should be saying about this, Mark? Do you think Labour's been strong enough on this?
I think, and we're probably going to come to Keir and his article later, so I don't expand too much on what Labour's currently doing. But plainly announcing policy initiatives in the middle of a pandemic is not a good idea, or making policy during it. But keeping pressure on the government, we are sadly failing to do that, or certainly publicly we're failing to be seen to keep pressure on the government about certain vulnerable groups, mental health, older people, those that are poor. And, you know, looking at this article, it raises one small issue in relation to fuel and not being able to increase costs, but there's so much more. Some of us may delight in being able to work from home, but some of us need also the camaraderie that comes with going into an office and meeting people and being able to chat to people and go for coffee with someone, particularly when it comes to mental health or simply just being lonely. And so there's consequences, not just financially, but across the board with working from home. Some may, as I say, some may find it great to work from home, but I think many miss going into an office. I certainly do. I miss going into an office and seeing friends and going for a quick glass of beer or whatever after work. Can't do that now because I'm not going into the office.
Esther?
There's a lot more to it than fuel bills, isn't there? Because actually, if you add it all up, if you add up the savings on transport and the fact that you don't have to buy clothes to go to work anymore and all of this stuff, the financial bits, these little bits and pieces, are not really the point. One of the points is, well, how able are people actually practically to work at home? So say you have two parents and you have children at home, how will they find the room, both of them, to work at home and not be disturbed? And it's more likely to be the people that have smaller houses aren't so well off that are going to. So there's a load more to think about besides fuel bills. And I think, going back to your question about how should Labour be challenging this narrative, they need to be challenging in terms of, well, what does society look like in the light of post-pandemic? How will we need to live? How will we manage to work? What happens to all of these offices that will need to close? How do we manage all the other businesses that we're talking about that might go bust and the unemployment resulting from that? So this is only the tip of a very, very large iceberg, and it actually deflects from the real issues, and Labour needs to be challenging the real issues and taking a really strategic view.
Do you want to talk about this one as well? This story about infection rules force 20% of special needs pupils to miss school. It seems a lot of these, the government's rules actually hold back those who are most in need. Yeah,
and there's question about risk assessment here, isn't there? So it says that there aren't enough rooms for all the tracheostomies to be done, and there's a real challenge then as to, well, who's being prioritised and what is being done to put that capacity in place, because that clearly needs to be done. And so the whole narrative here is, how do we prioritise and how do we get resources to the people that most need it? There may be people on the show and we may want to ask them, well, how do we manage when we have a child with all of these needs who's at home? And some of them are mentioned in the article. And my view about going back to Labour is that Labour needs to be pushing and prioritising the worst off in society, making sure that through this COVID crisis, we get the best for them.
Mark?
I think this is the tip of the iceberg. I mean, they use the extreme cases of tracheostomy, which I don't think there are that many students. Obviously, it profoundly affects the families that can't send their children to school. But we have a massive problem across the board with when we look at those children that fall into special needs categories, because local authorities have cut back over many years of austerity on funding for those children that need particular needs. Schools are getting further and further away from their homes, having to transport kids to those schools. We're losing teachers left, right and centre from those schools. And as a consequence of all of that, you're finding that there's not enough resources and there's not enough facilities to get kids to that school, to those schools that are sometimes so far away from where they live. So this is a tip of the iceberg. But I think there's a bigger problem here, a massive problem, is that children, particularly from poorer communities, are not being helped as best as they could be. We've had 4 months of children not being educated, those that live in poorer backgrounds with maybe parents that have separated and parents that are having to work full-time, that are not being able to give the educational support they need to their children, they've lost out. And right now I'm working with a group called Brutus, and a campaign group that are campaigning in relation to their children being forced to go back and getting fines if they don't send their vulnerable children back to school. And you know, it is a massive problem across the board with families and children that are scared to go back, with schools that don't have the equipment and resources to look after them, which is why I think we need a new approach to education right now. We need to do remote learning. We need to do and get communities involved in teaching our children, because I think, particularly here in Stoke, the education system is failing our kids, particularly the poorer and more vulnerable kids.
Oh, well, that's right. We'll have to talk about that another time, but possibly. What do you think about this story? I'll leave this as the last one for the COVID, but this arts bailout delay. I mean, some of the theatres and actors and performers are in serious trouble with what's going on. Do you think they've been too extreme in the ways of stopping people performing? I mean, football stadiums, and they've allowed some people, spectators in, and it just seems really tough on the arts world. I mean, I don't know how we're going to cope with this afterwards. What do you think, Esther?
Yeah, so there's a rethink needed, isn't there? So if you can only get, a fifth of people into a theatre, then the question is, do we want the theatre to continue, and what do we need to do to make that happen? So you'd be talking about massive subsidies to theatre, plus guaranteeing employment. So those are the sorts of challenges that needs to be made. It does seem that, to me, that the way that Sunak is dealing with this he hasn't got a plan. It's like, well, we had this little plan, now we're going to do this little plan, and it's very bitty, and it doesn't seem to have a strategic objective in mind about, so for example, what do we do with the arts? Are all these talented people who are going to be made redundant? Does that matter? And if so, what are we going to do about it? And those questions don't seem to be being discussed by Sunak and his colleagues, or indeed being challenged by Labour. And the arts are a very, very important part of our rich culture and society, and we need to think, well, how are we going to support them? These beautiful buildings, the overheads need to be paid. That's the first thing. All these very talented people, they need to be paid, but we need to think about how we're going to deploy them, because if you think about, imagine a theatre that's 1/5 full, it's still going to need all the artists performing. You're still going to need the building to be run. So what's needed is extra funding to make sure that happens, if you want it to happen.
Mark?
I agree with everything that Esther says, so I'm not going to repeat a lot of what she said, but I think there was an overpromise, again, an overpromise from the government to the theatres that simply hasn't worked out. The funding does not apply to staff and people who work in theatres. So the infrastructure and the rent and the heating and the building, the funding applies to, but it does not apply to those who work there. And that's the biggest problem, because most people who work in this industry are self-employed. And it's the self-employed across the country that have been let down, actually. Those who are self-employed, those who get paid by limited companies that have been let down by the government. They've just been left to fall away, basically. My own profession, I'm self-employed. I'm a barrister, but I've been a barrister for a number of years, so I've been able to gather enough savings to be able to cope. But the junior barristers, those who earn less than nothing on legal aid, are having a horrible time. A lot of them are leaving the profession. And when we get back into it, when the criminal justice system, when we need prosecutors for our criminal justice system, they won't be there in 2 years' time, because all the junior barristers have gone, all the junior solicitors have gone. And this is the crisis that we're hitting with the self-employed at the moment, is that they are on their knees. A lot of them can't cope and can't survive. And the government has done nothing for them, nothing.
Well, can I? We've got to move on because we're running out a bit out of time. But I wanted to talking about your work there. We've got this story in the Sunday Mirror about the Michael Stone case, which you're involved with, Mark.
Yeah, I'm his barrister. He sent me a letter which he asked me to forward on actually to the Sunday Mirror that wrote this article on the back of it. In short, I've been his barrister now for 24 years and have taken him back to the Court of Appeal. Indeed, I was there when that photograph was taken. What he's shouting right there is, "I am innocent," is what he's saying to the camera. But that's never obviously portrayed in the news. I've read every single document, every single page. I've seen listened to every single interview. I have absolutely no doubt that Michael Stone is innocent of this crime. The man that is down the bottom there, Levi Belfield, has confessed to committing the murder. There was no forensic evidence, no identification evidence. This, in my view, is probably the biggest miscarriage of justice we've got currently ongoing in this country. I noticed the last paragraph that the police officers said that they had a trial, that he was convicted, they went to the Court of Appeal and they maintained the conviction. We've got to remember that the Birmingham 6 went to the Court of Appeal 3 times before it was eventually overturned. The Guildford 4 had a trial and was convicted. Miscarriages of justice have been happening for many, many years. But right now, probably the biggest murder case, certainly in my career as a barrister, this man who was convicted is innocent and has now spent 24 years in jail.
Wow. Well, it's good to hear that from you, and we'll follow that story. We'll finish on the thing that you alluded to earlier, which was this Keir Starmer, "We have a mountain to climb." I think that was what he said during the conference. So they're sort of just keeping this going. The Observer seemed to be quite friendly towards Keir Starmer. Yeah. What do you want to say about this, Mark? Anything?
Me? Oh, right. I thought you were going to go to Esther on this one.
No, I thought I'll let Esther,
coming out of my ears.
I'll let Esther go.
I'll be very quick. We know exactly what the objective right now of Keir Starmer and those who surround him, that is separate as much as they can from Jeremy Corbyn. This is a new leadership, a new party. We have a mountain to climb, and we can't announce any policy initiatives, which I agree with, during a pandemic. And that is it. That's the narrative they want to keep going. We are different, we are a new leader. And that's what has been said really throughout the whole of this article. I'm actually more interested in the little 10 things that are in the box above there, 10 points you didn't know about Keir. Yeah. Which was quite interesting. I've never heard. Have you heard of this group that he likes here, Crispin? Is it the Orange?
No, I think he's got far better taste than I have in. Esther, do you like the look of
well, I mean,
approach here?
Well, new leadership. Mountain to climb, just root out all those horrible people that used to be like, what does this sound like? I mean, and of course he's got, of course, convincing the public won't be terribly difficult if he's got the Observer and all of the mainstream media and the BBC on his side. So I don't know why he's pretending it's going to be so difficult. The most difficult thing will be getting rid of everybody in the Labour Party that doesn't agree with him and wants to be a socialist.
No. Yeah, well, thank you both for coming on, and we're going to we've got a very busy show, so I'm going to move on to our comedians who've come to lighten the mood a bit with their take on some of the news stories in the tabloids. Don, I'll start with you. What do you do? What you do on social media, does it stress you out?
Yeah, it does stress me out because I'm dyspraxic. So it's like I'm not very good at admin. So when I started comedy, I got sacked from my admin job. and now I've been doing comedy for 13 years. And do you know what I've been up to, Crispin?
No.
I've been updating my Facebook, sending emails to promoters, looking at Twitter, Instagram, updating my website. So it turns out 13 years ago when I got sacked from an admin assistant job, 13 years later, it turns out what I'd actually become is admin assistant again. So it's yeah, I find it really annoying. But maybe I'm nearly 40, so maybe social media, I'm a bit too young for some of the things like TikTok and stuff like that.
Patrick, are you worried about your use of social media?
Not at all, because I've got 17 different fake accounts. So I just, it's great for me. I just, it's all my multiple personalities on there are loving it. I've got one as Piers Morgan. I come on also as Alicia Dixon. I come on, so I don't know if you've probably already seen me on social media.
Have you just got up, Patrick? You look a bit tired.
Yeah, I literally, do you know where I've been? I was near Mark's house. I went there last night, he wouldn't let me in. I was in Millham last night.
You were in Cumbria last night, and
Yeah.
you came down in the car, you've come back down to London.
Literally drove yesterday morning, got up, I had breakfast with Lily, then I jumped in the car, drove all the way up to Millham, I was doing it was part of a tour show that had been rescheduled from spring, socially distanced in Millham. Right, they were only allowed 80 people in the theatre. Only 30 people live in Millham. They had to bust in 50 people from surrounding areas. And then 7 of them were sheep dressed up in human clothes.
I'm next.
Oh, Susie.
Hello.
So Susie's come in to speak about social media. What do you want to say, Susie?
Do you know, the most peaceful time of my life was when I flounced off Facebook for about 2 weeks, and it was brilliant. But I have to, well, not that I've got any work at the moment, but I rely on it for work. So I get people contacting me on Twitter and Facebook and things. But it's so nice when you come off it for a bit and just get on with your real life. Because, yeah, it is really distracting. And sometimes I've not been able to read a book because I have to keep checking my phone. But like I said, I've got no work. And the main news story that's disturbed me today was I was thinking, now that the Lido's closed and I've got a bit of time on my hands, I thought, well, at least I can start using my Cineworld card. I thought I can go cinema as much as I want now. And then I looked at Twitter this morning and they're closing. So I think I'm a jinx. So I was thinking, I can just go and, so did you hear about this? Cinemas are closing? It's all James Bond's fault, apparently, because they're delaying all the big releases. So, so it's disappointing. But I've got to go out now. I'm on my way out. I've got a roast dinner. Oh, yeah,
you've got to go. Yeah, you said so. It's good we caught you. Cool.
I'm going with my niece and my mum. We're going for a vegan roast dinner.
Oh,
nice.
And I've got pepperami in my pocket to have in the toilets. But no, I've been there before. It's really nice. It's a really nice place in Plymouth. And then my niece wants to go window shopping. So I've just extended my overdraft for the day. I was going to say, on the way, I'm going to just put a little sheet up on the bridge next to Bernie's 60th to say, get well soon, Donald. And I bet that won't last a year. Sorry to dash and love and leave you. It's always nice to see you.
Good to see you, Susie. Thanks
I've got to get out the door.
All right.
Take care.
Take care.
Have a lovely day.
And we've got this story here in the Sunday Mirror about how you can pay 85 quid to cook for yourself. What do you think about that, Don? Are you up for cooking a lobster on your own for 85 quid?
I could do that. First thing I have to do is set up a crowdfunding page to afford the lobster. 85 quid. This is Rick Stein, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's restaurant. And the weird thing is someone made a joke about this the other day. They're selling lobster rolls in Pret-a-Manger. I mean, is that the first thing you need after a pandemic, a lobster roll? Is that the most essential thing? I mean, who thought? We need toilet roll, we need pasta, and we need lobster rolls. I mean, how middle class is Britain becoming in certain areas? Is that's the only thing you need? But if anyone wants to send some money my way, I'll happily try some lobster.
Yeah.
Okay. Patrick, you like lobster?
I I don't think I've ever tried it. But I mean, at that price, I didn't realise it was that expensive. If I was spending £85 for a lobster dinner, that would mean 85 people are coming round to my house to eat. There is no way I could. How could you justify spending £85 on a meal like that? That is ridiculous. Unless I'm charging the lobster rent. You know what I mean? There's no way. I mean, that would. I mean, Lily's a vegan as well, which I know Susie was talking about going out on vegan brunch, so we wouldn't even be able to have a lobster in the house unless we dressed it up in cabbage.
Just gotta be careful if I were you. If 85 people come around your house, someone might snitch on you.
I know, yeah.
Unless you give them some of the lobster, so as a peace offering.
They're going to dress up as tuna, and then they're just going to come in and see them.
Now, look, I'm going to have to move on. I'm sorry, Patrick, you look like you need a rest. You've had a long night. What time did you get home?
So I set off as soon as the show finished in Millham about 9:30, 10. I jumped in the car, got back about 3:30, 4 o'clock.
Oh, what time did you get up just now?
Yeah, well, about 10. I woke up about 9-ish, and then I looked. Lily was like going, I think you look really tired, and I said, no, it's all right. It's only 4 in the morning, and it wasn't. So I thought, I better get back to bed.
Well, I think you should go back. I think you should have another sleep now. I think you should have a rest. Thank you for coming. It's amazing you went all the way to Millham and back. That's incredible.
Yeah, it was fun.
And it shows how far you'll go for a gig at this time.
I know, yeah. No, but it was a tour thing that they rescheduled. I know the guys have been, Mark and Esther were talking about the theatres and stuff. At this theatre, seriously, in a serious point, though, they are in trouble. They had it was sold out last night. They had to social distance 80 people. It normally holds twice, 3 times. But she was saying, Jackie, who runs it, they try and get funding, I think, but they were saying that their staff have been on furlough, but it looks like they might have to lay loads of people off because the next round of grants won't help, I think, for the staff and stuff. And it's such that's the only thing in Millham that is the only thing really there for live performances.
Oh, it's terrible.
So it's awful, really, but yeah.
Yeah, it is a bad situation. Yeah. Thank you both for coming on. We hope that we'll get you more work and stuff, and you won't have to go all the way to Millham and back to do that.
Thanks, Crispin.
Yeah. Cheers, Don, and cheers, Patrick. Now we've got quite a bit to go through on this show, but I wanted to show this clip that I edited from Wednesday's discussion on lockdown. So everyone can see what kind of flavour of what we had on Wednesday.
You know, we're all herd animals, aren't we? We like to be together. We like to hug each other. We like to smile together and laugh. And that's been taken out.
The one thing I have learned, I thought I was a loner. And I like my own company. But I don't. I miss the interaction with family and friends.
There's a real worry about clients that you can't see, especially in domestic violence situations.
I live in quite a big flat, but it kept getting smaller and smaller. It's only the sheer fact of the park around the corner saved my sanity. But some of my friends, they've working in the big supermarkets. They kind of had to change their shift patterns. They've become recluse. Their mental health has basically fallen through the floor.
Work in a children's centre, and they're not planning to open until January. So this crucial place in the middle of the community isn't open. I know that many of those children had no internet access. They were trapped in small flats with no gardens. And I know that they suffered very bad mental health issues.
We have a real poverty of IT here. We have poor people living in Ipswich. Yeah. They're on 0-hour contracts. They can't afford £30 a month for an internet connection. Their kids don't have a laptop.
People, like, oh, it's great, you can just sit at home and do nothing, get part of your salary. But for me, losing that part of my salary, I've still got to pay my rent. I can't get a mortgage holiday because I don't have a mortgage. I've still got to pay my rent, still got to pay my council tax, still got to pay all my bills. Bills are now higher because we're in the house all the time, which if I then get made redundant, I've got all the extra bills that I've mounted up. I had to use my credit card because I had to buy stuff. I had to pay twice as much for food that I would normally. I feel like I'm in a constant state of stress because the bills are mounting up and I just don't know when it's going to end, if it's going to end, how I'm going to manage. Is having a massive effect on my mental health.
Yeah, so the show we had on Wednesday really opened my eyes to how this is affecting people, the lockdown. And it was quite interesting that on the same day as that, there was a discussion, there was a debate in Parliament on the Coronavirus Act. And I'd like to share what was said by our guest speaker.
Speaker, I've listened to the Secretary of State's comments, and certainly the revocations that he set out have been welcome, but they're cosmetic, and they certainly don't go anywhere near restoring the safeguards that those that are suffering from mental health problems, disabled people and those in need of care deserve. And as for his promise for parliamentary scrutiny, well, frankly, it's nothing more than a gentleman's agreement. Mr. Speaker, this Act in its current form allows clumsy and asymmetric authoritarianism. Powers to restrict mass gatherings might well have been necessary, but broad police powers under Schedule 21 to detain potentially infectious people have led to unlawful prosecutions 100% of the time. And where were the extra powers, the resources to inspect or restrict unsafe workplaces, or to requisition private lab space, healthcare or other facilities for mass testing? Where was the powers to take charge of food supply in the event of future lockdowns, to avoid further panic buying and ensure that shielding and vulnerable people receive the food that they deserve? The government demands that its citizens give up their liberties and livelihoods in this pandemic, Mr. Speaker, yet it doesn't stand beside them. The comments that the Secretary has set out today certainly don't deal with the issues that many of our constituencies face, and some of us begin to worry that the government's confused and often contradictory public messaging is not mere incompetence, but a studied chaos designed to blame ordinary people instead of taking democratic political responsibility for some of the worst pandemic management in the world. The government is at real risk of squandering public sentiment and public goodwill, and at the very least it must set out to revoke the most insidious parts of this Act tonight.
Now, I was quite surprised that only 6 Labour MPs actually voted against the government's legislation, and it was very heartwarming that Rebecca Long-Bailey did so, and it's fantastic that she's come onto the show today. How are you doing, Rebecca?
I'm all right. How are you? Thanks for having me on, and happy Sunday to everybody.
Oh, I'm fine, but I mean, we had this show on Wednesday that coincided with that debate, and the issue, the mental health issue, was so commonplace. Like, we did a survey, and 50% of people said that their friends, family, or themselves had it's deteriorated through lockdown. And it just seems as though we're going into this without any discussion at all. The government's going right, doing whatever it wants to do, and it isn't paying off. So why were only 6 Labour MPs voting against this Act?
Well, I think it's important to understand what the Act actually meant, and you're right in what you say. I mean, I think people are fatigued by all of this now. I think we're all in a collective state of what I can only describe as depression. People are lonely. They're worried about their incomes and whether they're going to have a job and be able to survive for the next 6 months. So anything that we do, if we're giving up our liberties or we're going into any form of lockdown, we need to know that A, it's going to result in the infection rate going down, and B, we're actually going to be financially protected in taking that action so that we're all financially secure, as well as making sure that we're safe. And the problem with this bill was that it was passed 6 months ago, and the Labour Party and myself let it go through at that time because we thought the government faced an unprecedented task. We'd never seen anything like this before, and there might be powers that the government would need to exercise to keep everybody safe. But even so, there were huge concerns about the extent of this bill and the way that it could allow the government to pass any law that it basically wanted to under the guise of coronavirus without having to go before Parliament at all. And we're at the date on Wednesday where we were thinking about whether this Act should be renewed and whether things within the Act needed to be revoked to come out of the Act. And there's a lot of evidence to suggest that there are quite insidious parts of the Act that did need to come out. And I'll just set out very briefly to everyone on the call the main points, really, because it was a bizarre situation. I mean, to find myself voting against renewal of the Act with the likes of some of the Tory rebels like Peter Bone was bizarre. And I suspect that we were both voting against it for diametrically opposing reasons. I wanted the government to have a strategy that put public safety first and protected our own financial security, whereas I suspect that they were coming at it from a very different angle, where they just, you know, they didn't want there to be further lockdowns, they didn't want further restrictions, and they were coming at it from, well, you know, under the kind of premise of civil liberties, but without thinking about the other actions that the government might need to take to protect people going forward. But very briefly, there were three key points. The first point that I was very concerned about was that the Act allowed for the creation of what were called easements to ease the burden on local authorities. Because at the moment, local authorities have a duty of care to provide certain services, whether it's social care, whether it's support for those suffering from mental health problems, whether it's support for those who need care if they're suffering from any form of disability. And the Act allowed for the government to pass regulations to basically water that down. And that, you know, there might have been, you know, a need to discuss what was possible in the time when we were in a full lockdown and people weren't allowed to go in and out of people's houses to provide care and things like that. But we're not in that place now. And what we did see was that a lot of people started to see their care diluted and still have their care diluted. And MenCap, for example, found that 7 out of 10 learning disabled people had some or all of their support cut during the pandemic, and that's unacceptable. And there were other harrowing stories of people that were desperately in need of care within their homes, and they weren't receiving the support that they deserved at all. And it was so bad that even the Equality and the Human Rights Commission and the Law Society both concluded that those easements needed to be revoked from the Act. So that was the first point, and we didn't see any revocation other than Matt Hancock stating that 2 doctors needed to sign off anything under the Mental Capacity Act, deprivation of liberty safeguards, but all the other easements were left in place. The second point was a really worrying part. It was called Schedule 21, and it allowed the police to forcibly test and detain any one of us that they deemed potentially infectious. Now, there's no definition of what potentially infectious is, and we're all potentially infectious. So basically, any one of us could be arrested and detained for being potentially infectious, which seems really bizarre. And the worrying thing is that the Crown Prosecution Service reviewed every single prosecution under that Schedule 21, and they found that in 100% of cases, the prosecutions, the charges were completely unlawful. So that part of the Act was being misused, whether deliberately or not deliberately. It was a farce and it needed to come out, and human rights organisations stated that. Now, the third part of it, and this is the most frightening part of it that caused huge concern, was that the Act overall chillingly restricted democracy, and it handed over huge levels of power to the government. It allowed the government to postpone elections, for example, to close borders. And although it said within the Act that the government would, you know, the legislation would lapse after 2 years, the fine print actually showed that any part of it can be extended for a further 6 months with indefinite reviews possible without parliamentary approval. So it was an Act that was giving unabated powers to the government. And as MPs and as citizens, we could do very, very little to stop them. And that's why I was really worried about it. And that's not to say that I don't think, because as I say, I come from a different kind of perspective than probably the Tory rebels do. I think we needed legislation in place to give the government power to do things. Well, the sorts of things I want the government to be given power to do is to be able to take control of lab testing facilities, so requisition spaces so that schools can have additional space so that they can have smaller classroom sizes. I want the government to be able to intervene in some way if there's another lockdown so that we have food security and we don't see panic buying, and that we can make sure that every single person who's shielding and can't leave the house can actually get hold of the food that they need. I wanted to see the government be given the power and resources to be able to send people into workplaces to make sure that they were secure, COVID secure if you like, and that workers were protected, and that we weren't hearing the constant stories of outbreaks that we are at the moment. But none of that was in the bill. So we were told that we needed it because the government needed to exercise powers throughout the pandemic. But their strategy never really seemed to be going to the extent that was required in order to protect public health. And that's what concerned me. And in terms of the way the vote went on Wednesday, it was quite chaotic because the matter wasn't intended to go to a vote, and we kind of tried to find out if anybody was going to be pushing it to a vote beforehand, and nobody wanted to push it to a vote. So at the time, it seemed as if there wouldn't be any opposition to it, and then there was at the very last minute. And I think that's what caused myself and others to vote against it. And in terms of other MPs, like certainly other MPs on the left, I know that they're of the same view as me. They're completely against the easements, the pernicious parts of the bill. So I think it's a view that's held across the left, whether or not people actually were physically there to vote against it or not.
Oh, I see. Right. But the government seems to be pushing for more and more powers. And it's sort of doing this under this fear that if we don't do that, then this will all get worse. And they've got the media behind them as well. There doesn't seem to be much opposition in many ways to giving them extended powers for all these things. Are you willing to take on a campaign to keep them in check? Because the Labour Party seems...
I think it's the job of the opposition to scrutinise and hold the government to account. And what certainly I think that as a movement we should be doing, it's not just responding to what the government's saying, because the government strategy isn't working. The test, track and trace, which would have been one route for us to get towards any semblance of normality, isn't working. You've got private organisations carrying out testing, and certainly nowhere near the scale that's required. You've not got kind of a strategy in terms of lockdown. People don't understand the rules. Like in Salford, we're on a lockdown within a lockdown. No one really knows what that means. No one understands that, you can go to the pub, that's fine, but you're not allowed to go and visit your nan and sit in a back garden and make sure she's all right, because that's like the whole kind of crux of coronavirus. It's all to do with your nan rather than, going into work every day or going to the pub. And people don't get that, and they get quite angry about it because they think, well, we're being asked not to see our loved ones, we're being asked not to have that kind of interaction with each other. But for things that, supposedly keep the economy going, that's fine. But then even the businesses within the economy are saying that they're still taking a hit because people are so frightened and confused about what's happening. It's not normal, and the economy isn't being kept going. So what we need to do, I think, as a movement is show that, look, firstly, we have to have a strategy that puts public health right as a #1 priority. And then we build an economic response to support that. And of course, in protecting people, you're going to have to see huge levels of government support and investment, and you're going to need a longer term strategy to rebuild the economy. One thing that I think we can use to do that is the Green New Deal, because we know how much income that could generate for future governments. I think the Goldman Sachs, not Greenpeace, I think, that estimated that there was $16 trillion to be made worldwide if we really grasp the nettle and invest in the way that we should do. So the government really does need to set out bold strategies, not just tinker around the edges. They have to have a rebuilding plan, and that needs to be used to offset some of the costs that are required to support businesses properly now. I mean, you were hearing about the theatre industry, the events industry is another industry that's on the edge of collapse. And these are areas that need huge levels of support if we're going to have those industries when we come out of this pandemic in 6 to 12 months' time.
I mean, the Labour leadership at the moment don't seem to be speaking about this kind of thing that you're talking about. They're being very guarded about their response to the government. Do you think that's tactically naive? Because this isn't, people are not happy with this lockdown and the confusing messaging. So to go along in any way with the government is actually counterproductive, isn't it?
I mean, I think in recent days, certainly from what I've seen in the press, the language that we've been using has been a little bit more robust than it had been previously. And whilst I might not have agreed with, you know, the kind of the amount of support that we were giving to the government at the start of this pandemic, you know, that was the strategy that the party took. And there were certain areas that I thought we should have been more vocal. Schools, for example, is one of them. But we do seem to be moving towards a position now where we're more vocal. And I think that's what we've got to do, because the general public aren't happy with the way things are at the moment. And we do need to start setting out a clearer path so that people understand what's going to happen in the next 6 months. At the moment, we're living one day at a time. And it's having a huge effect on people's mental health, not to mention the fact that most people can't financially plan.
No, I will. I think it would be great if we could continue to talk about this on later shows. Would you be willing to come on again? I mean,
of course, anytime.
And we've got we've had the exclusive interview with Rebecca Long-Bailey after her speech, and thank you very much for that. We'll flag up how we get these exclusives, and thank you very much for coming on. I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, you too.
And we're now going to conduct our clash of the CLPs Semi Final between Southampton. Are you there, the Frickers?
Matthew and I are here, Crispin.
Oh, okay. And I'm looking for Kevin. Are you there, Kevin?
I'm here, Crispin.
Right. Okay. So we've got Liverpool Wavertree against Southampton. Now, Kevin, you're well known for your singing. You did a good "Oh, What a Beautiful Morning." I won't be asking you to do that again. Not that it was bad. So, the Frickers, are you confident you're going to win?
We'll try our best.
Okay. Well, we'll start off with the. I like that's a very good way of seeing things. Right, here we go. We're going to start off with a picture question. Who is this?
Oh, God.
He's in the first Labour government.
Robert Tressel?
No.
No, it's a guess.
Sorry, I don't know. No, I don't know. Tressel wasn't in that government.
Okay.
No.
It's actually Arthur Greenwood.
Oh.
He became deputy leader as well. You should know all this stuff. The next question for you is, who is this?
Oh, God.
Oh.
J.R. Klein's.
He's got it. Kevin's got it. Kevin's got J.R. Klein's. Right. Wavertree 1. Right. Come on, Lisa. Come on.
Come on, Matthew.
I'm moving up to date now. The next question is a picture question. Somebody in the shadow cabinet. If you get this one, you know this might be your leveler here. You ready, Southampton? Are you ready, Wavertree?
Yeah, go for it. Cat Smith?
No.
No. Oh.
No, sorry, Crispin. They've got to be dead before I recognise them.
That's Holly Lynch. She is the shadow immigration minister.
Never heard of it.
Okay,
As for this shadow cabinet, we've never heard of. That's the trouble.
No, there's quite a few in there. You know, quite a few. Right now, what we have now is some questions. I'll give this because you're behind Southampton. You get to go first. You choose the answer. Which union has the largest membership, ASLEF or the Bakers?
Which one, Matthew? ASLEF.
Kevin, you have to go.
The Bakers.
Bakers. Kevin's got it. It's the Bakers. It's the Bakers. Now, I'm going to do a different type of question. I want you. This is going to Kevin. Oh no, this is a straightforward one. Who was the longest? Who was Labour leader for the longest period? Harold Wilson or Tony Blair?
Tony Blair.
So that puts Lisa. You've got to say Wilson, and I'm sorry, Kevin, you were wrong on that one. It was Harold Wilson. Harold Wilson was leader for 13 years and 2 months. Blair was leader for 12 years and 11 months. So Southampton.
Well, 12 years too long as far as I'm
Okay, right. Well, that's your opinion. Right, okay, there's no set answer to that one. That's not a factual answer. Now we're going to do. I want you to. If I ask you, Lisa, how many deputy leaders of the Labour Party that are still alive could you name?
God, how many do you think, Matthew, could you name? I've got definitely 2. I've got 2. Matthew thinks he could name 2.
Former ones or still ones?
No, that are still alive.
Former and just any deputy leader that's ever been still alive. How many do you think you can get?
2.
2? Not more than that?
No. I don't know.
Yeah, probably. Let's go for 4.
4, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Kevin, how many deputy leaders do you think you can name that are still alive? Can you go higher than 4?
No, I think I can only go for 4, honestly.
Okay. Right, so that goes back to you, Lisa. Can you give me the 4?
Tom Watson.
Yeah.
Angela Rayner.
Yeah.
Oh, what's his name? 2 Jags. Oh. His name, come on, Matthew, you said, come on.
John Truscott.
John Truscott. Yeah, 2 Jags. John Truscott. And who's the other one?
I don't know. I think it might be this one.
Gordon Brown.
Gordon Brown was not a deputy leader, so he
was not a deputy leader, Matthew.
You have you don't get that, but Kevin, this is the decider. If you get this, you can't. Just imagine it, Kevin. Liverpool have been in a few finals recently, but they've not been in the clash of the CLPs final. So this is the big one. This is like a penalty for you. Can you name a 4th deputy leader that is still alive, and that's not Tom Watson, not Angela Rayner, and not John Prescott?
Okay, I'll try Margaret Beckett.
Kevin, you've made it to the final of the clash of the CLPs. You could also have said, by the way, Roy Hattersley on that, and you could also have said Harriet Harman, who was deputy leader for quite a number of years, actually.
Yeah.
So there you go. So our final of Clash of the CLPs next week is Liverpool Wavertree against South East Cornwall. So there you go. It's totally different types of seats. Great. Thank you for both coming on. Sorry to the Frickers for not getting on.
That doesn't matter. We'll be here to watch. At least we got We got quite far, so
that fair play
we're
cup?
quite surprised that we even won one round, let alone two.
Well, there were 3 of you, so that did help a little bit.
There's only 2 today, and there was only 2 of us last time because Rick was at work. Yeah.
All right. Well, yeah. Kevin's just got loads of books, and
And I've also got lots of old pictures of members of the Labour government as well.
Okay. Well, thank you both for coming on, and I'm going to talk to Rob Johnson now. Rob.
Morning.
Thank you for staying with us. How was your breakfast? What was it?
It was really quite a bit middle classes, but very nice sourdough bread, and on top of that, Marmite peanut butter.
Oh, what do you put on first? The Marmite, obviously. The bacon.
No. You can get peanut butter that is Marmite peanut butter.
Oh, that's horrible.
And Marmite. Well, you could also in my fridge. There's Marmite hummus.
Oh my God. Marmite hummus. That sounds really horrible.
Yeah.
Right, so we're
whatever next.
We're a little bit over time, so I thought I'd quickly get you onto your song that you've performed for tonight, for today, for this morning. What have you got?
I was trying to find a way of writing about how it's counterproductive to say that you're going to do your enemy's oppressive measures better than they are. And I came up, but I basically ended up writing about an imaginary village in Vichy, France, which I think is perhaps a bit convoluted. I think perhaps I should have just stuck with Ed Miliband's mug.
Oh, okay. So
it's a cautionary tale of a French lawyer, basically.
A cautionary tale. See the little village of Saint-Maurice-sur-Seine. Hear the enemy war machine advance. Read the daily paper of Saint-Maurice-sur-Seine. Say, surrender 'cause we haven't got a chance. Oh, see the enemy soldiery in Saint-Maurice-sur-Seine. Call a meeting in the village square. The general says it's my job to enforce the martial law. Up stands the little lawyer, Jean-Louis Pierre. He says, your orders must be carried out precisely. We have no choice, monsieur et mademoiselle. Let me uphold the law, I'll do it nicely, 'cause I can do the same job just as well. So in the little village of Saint-Maurice-sur-Seine, instead of soldiers kicking down your door, Jean-Louis Pierre comes knock, knock, knocking to say your radio's against the law. He says, pardonnez-moi, good citizen of Saint-Maurice-sur-Seine, please step this way into my waiting car. And on we go, and off they go. They're never seen again. The daily paper says, hurrah, 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 because orders must be carried out precisely. We have no choice, monsieur et mademoiselle. Let me uphold the law, I'll do it nicely. Oh, I can do the same job just as well. Jean-Louis Pierre, the mayor, says, thank your lucky stars. In Berlin, an axe chops off your head. Here in France, he'll tell you as you climb into his car. Here we use the guillotine instead. Oh, Jean-Louis Pierre, the mayor, oh, he's a patriotic man, and communists and Jews will have to go. And it surely is a comfort when it's time for you to go, to know you'll be arrested by a neighbour that you know. Because orders must be carried out precisely. We have no choice, monsieur et mademoiselle. Let me uphold the law, I'll do it nicely. I can do the same job just as well. See the liberation, Mayor Jean-Louis Pierre, arrested, tried for treason, sentenced to death. The guillotine is waiting for Mayor Jean-Louis Pierre. See the lawyer hold his final breath. Hear the lever click. See the blade descend. Halfway down it freezes in midair. A miracle, the priest declares, the good Lord surely wants him spared. The lawyer says, it just needs greasing. Look, on that bit there. Oh. Orders must be carried out precisely. We have no choice, monsieur et mademoiselle. Let us uphold the law, we'll do it nicely. We can do the same job just as well. Orders must be carried out precisely. Hold your nose, ignore the nasty smell. Uphold the enemy's law, but do it nicely. Yes, we can do the same job. Oh, we can do the same job. Oh, we can do the same job just as well, but nicely.